If you're writing and recording music at home and you've ever had any trouble getting your speakers to sound right in the room or getting your mix to translate to systems outside of your home listening space, there could be a problem with your room acoustics. Now, room acoustics can be a very big rabbit hole to go down. There are a multitude of acoustic treatment options on the market. But in this video, we're going to check out a really cool piece of software that can help your room sound better and help your mixes translate better to systems outside of your home recording space. In this video, we're going to check out SoundID Reference from the guys at Sonarworks. So these days, many of us have home studios. Whether you have a space like mine, which is acoustically treated, or you are just recording on a laptop in your spare bedroom, the chances are you have a space that you're working in, but it may not be ideal. Even the room I'm in, even though I have acoustically treated this space to the best of my ability, this room is not acoustically designed for the purpose that I'm using it for, which means ultimately I'm going to face some issues. Now, in my space, I have my acoustic treatment to tame some of the reflections and sort of build up areas for my monitor speakers. When we're building our own home systems, whether it's a modest system or quite a complex system, we spend a lot of time and money researching things like acoustic treatments, what monitor speakers to use, what plugins to buy for our mixes, and everything else along those lines. But sometimes we don't think about very simple things like the room correction. SoundID Reference is a fantastic piece of software that you can use as a plugin in your DAW, or you can just run it on your home system at all times. And what it does is it corrects the EQ curve of your room. Now, what this means is you're actually going to hear your space as flat as possible. Now, no recording space at home is ever perfectly flat. Professional studios are designed to be flatter in their response, which means you get more out of your studio monitors, which means your mixes translate better. But like I said, when we're doing this at home, that's never the case. There's always something in the room that causes some kind of issue. Now, for me personally, in my home studio, I often have trouble in mixes with the low end. So towards the back of my studio, there's a lot of low end buildup. And then in the middle of the room, so just behind where I'm sat, there's a bit of a mid-range dip. So depending on where you're listening in the room, you can hear some discrepancies in frequencies. This is something that has been a bit of an issue for me in the past when mixing songs. I've often found that songs I've mixed here will sound great when I'm sat in my chair at my desk, and then I take a copy out to the car to listen to, or I listen on a different system in the house, and the mix is completely wrong. Even though I have good speakers and I know my equipment well, it still never quite translates. And that's because I'm not hearing things that are wrong in the room. SoundID Reference is going to help you hear those things. So just before we jump in and take a look at SoundID Reference, I just want to say this is a sponsored video. So the guys at Sonarworks are paying me to create this video, but I have actually been a user of their products for many years now, and I'm a big, big fan of what they do. So all the opinions are my own. I have actually been using these products for a very long time prior to this sponsored video. So SoundID Reference, for anyone who's unfamiliar with this program, is the newest successor to Sonarworks Reference 4. So many studios have been using Reference 4 as the standard of room correction software for many years. SoundID Reference is the next in that line. This software is fantastic for correcting the EQ curve of your listening space. So whether you're working in a space that just needs a little bit of a tune-up, or you have a room that is quite problematic, SoundID Reference can solve a lot of your listening problems. SoundID Reference works by taking a measurement of your acoustic space. So we're going to go through the steps on how to do that later on in this video. To do that, you need a measurement microphone. So this one I'm holding is the Sonarworks XREF20. This is the official Sonarworks measurement microphone that's calibrated for the software, but any other measurement mic will also work with this. You can technically use any microphone for this process, but a measurement microphone will give you the flattest, most true sounding response to your speakers. When you've finished measuring your space by moving the measurement microphone around the room in line with what the software asks you to do, it will then process those recordings that it makes. It picks up a series of pulses and sweeps, and then it processes all that information with what it hears in the room. it will give you a detailed EQ view of how both your speakers work and operate in your existing space. So I'm going to show you mine right now. So here's how my room EQ looks. So these purple lines are my speakers. The slightly darker one is my left speaker, and the slightly lighter one is my right speaker. So you can see where my problem areas are. This black line in the middle, that's flat. So ideally we want our EQ to be as flat as possible because that's going to give us the truest listening experience. These purple lines are showing us what SoundID Reference is hearing in my room. So you can see here, I've got this little low end hump of about 6 dB, and then this massive slope off here at around 100 Hertz. That's the low end problem I was telling you about. In my listening position, the low end is a little bit lacking, but if you go to the back of the room, there's a lot of buildup. Then we've got this big hump here just above 100 Hertz, but only from the left speaker. The right speaker is much lower. Then we've got a big right speaker hump here, somewhere around the 200 Hertz mark. And then it starts to dip off. We've got this big, about a 5 dB scoop there just below 1K. And then at the top, we do have this slight rise from both speakers. It's pretty consistent there in the top end, but this is quite normal. Monitor speakers do tend to just raise up a little bit in the higher frequencies. Now, like I said, this black line, the target, that in an ideal world is what we want. We want a complete even frequency response from low to high all across the spectrum. We don't get that. That is an impossible metric to actually obtain, but that's what we want in an ideal world. And you can see my system is actually far from ideal. So what SoundID Reference has done is it's processed that, and it's given me this. So these green lines are what it's done. So you can see here where this bump is in the low end, SoundID Reference has actually trimmed that EQ off for me. Where I have dips, it's added those frequencies back in. So it's essentially mirroring what it hears with the opposite EQ action. So anytime SoundID Reference picks up a bump at a certain frequency, it cuts it by the same amount. And it's doing that on a speaker by speaker basis. So you can see here, we've got two green lines, one light and one dark. That actually mirrors the action of these speakers. So the dark purple, which is my left speaker, and the dark green, which is the calibration on my left speaker, are mirror images. So because my speaker is bumping out probably about 6 dB or a little bit more around this sort of 150 to 200 Hertz range, SoundID Reference is actually taking that away to flatten it out a bit. I can also then see the simulated after. So this simulated after, you can't see it very well there, but let me just turn some of these other options off. That is what my EQ curve now looks like with SoundID Reference applied. So we have the before and the after. So you can see where it's flattened those things out. So the flattening here takes place by this EQ curve happening to counteract this EQ curve, which gives me this much flatter curve. Now you can see there are still some slight bumps and dips here and there. That's fine, that's to be expected. And obviously this big roll off here is probably around about the 40 to 50 Hertz range, which again, my speakers can't go that low. So that roll off is completely fine as well. It can also help you recognize any phase issues with your speakers. So if you have speakers with phase issues, you can see where they're in and out of phase between the left and right speakers as well. It's a very, very in-depth piece of software that you can really get a lot of mileage out of. You can do a lot of different things across your system to correct the EQ curve. Once you have your EQ curve set, so let's go to our simulated after, that's what my EQ curve now looks like. I can also use a custom target. So I can actually choose different points on this that I might want to bump or cut frequencies. I can apply a bunch of different EQ things, low shelf, bell, and high shelves. I can put as many of those in as I want. I can save different presets as well. And I can also do the same thing for headphones. So it comes loaded with about 400 headphone profiles. So whatever headphones you're using, you can pretty much get the profile for those as well. This is such a useful thing because you can really fine tune what the system picks up and what the system detects versus what you hear, and really kind of calibrate that to suit your needs in your space. Then where it gets really cool is the translation check. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes when you're recording at home, you take what you do and you put it in another space and it never quite works. This has a bunch of different preset EQ curves, like a car, for instance, and you can run that against your speakers, and you can see how a car system would affect the EQ curve as well. So a car, for instance, will have a huge mid-cut, but it will have a bump in the bass and a little bit of a spike at the top end of the treble. You can actually make your mix sound like it's being played back on those systems. So it's got a couple of different ones for a car. It's got, obviously the different descriptions here: an entry-level car sound system, an executive car, or a luxury SUV. You've got in-ear headphones, so different sort of in-ear from, Apple AirPods through to sport headphones, different types of laptop speakers, over the sort of head earphones, a smartphone, or even some interesting studio speakers like the little Auratone Mix Cubes or the NS11, which is obviously their take on the Yamaha NS10 speakers. You can use all of these different EQ curves. You can see there the NS10's got a huge low end roll off and a bit of a mid bump here and some high end tail off to hear how your mix would translate on those different systems. So that's really useful because what you can essentially then do is take your mix and trial run it on some simulations of these different systems before you actually take it out of the studio. So that means if you're looking to see if it'll sound good in a car, you can run the car translation check on here. And if it doesn't quite sound right in the studio, you can make some of those tweaks to make it sound consistent between regular speakers and car speakers. Then you can go test that in the real world. SoundID Reference allows you to do all of that from your home studio. If you're someone who moves between different monitor speakers and you change your headphone setup regularly, you can actually save a bunch of different user presets here as well. So you can actually calibrate this for multiple systems. You can even use it just for listening to music, so you could fine tune your home studio speakers to suit how you want things to sound for music playback as well as mixing work. So I've got my measurement mic in hand now. I'm going to show you guys how to measure the room using Sonarworks SoundID Reference. So let's get set up and make our room sound better. All right, now we're going to use the included software SoundID Reference Measure to measure the room. So my mic is set up, ready to go. I did mention that my studio has some acoustic treatment. So let's just talk a little bit about what I've got going on here first of all. So I have some acoustic panels at key reflection points in the room. So either side of the room, there's a panel right next to me and a panel in the back corner. That's mirrored this side of the studio. We have on the door, I have the back wall also treated, and there's also some here, even though it's behind a wall of amps. I also have some acoustic treatment right above me, and as you can see there on the ceiling at the back of the studio. Behind my computer, I have bass traps, 4 running along the ceiling, and some acoustic tiles on the wall. And there's also some bass traps in the corners as well. So my studio is treated. It's not perfect, but it does have some acoustic treatment, which takes the edge off. Sonarworks Reference ID helps me just kind of fine tune this space. The speakers I'm calibrating today are my Cali Audio LP6 second wave speakers. I love these speakers. They're very affordable, but they sound great. And obviously we're using the Sonarworks mic right here on the stand. That's going to be my measurement mic. So what we're going to do is we're going to use SoundID Reference Measure. So fire that up on your computer, hit measure your speakers. It gives you a bunch of different steps to go through. So obviously you need to make sure your phantom power is on and you need to agree that the interface is set to the right sample rate. Go through all those steps and then it'll take you to a screen where you enter the code if you have the official mic or you select a different microphone that you're using. So I'm using the official Sonarworks mic. So I have a code because it's the code that's on the microphone. That gives me the calibration profile for that mic. The reason this is useful is because if you are using one of the official Sonarworks mics, then obviously the software knows what the calibration profile of that particular mic is. so it can give you even better results. But obviously, if you're using an aftermarket or a third-party measurement mic, you're still going to get great results anyway. So you can see this is the profile of the mic that I'm using right here. It has a slight bump, sort of probably about 5K up to sort of 9, and then it starts to tail off again. Now that's fine. That's a minor detail. That just means the software will account for that when it's working. So you just go through the setup steps, select your interface, select your ins and outs. Once you've chosen your ins and outs, you have to balance the gain by following the guides on the software. Then we start to work on the room specs. So this gives you a few tips on how to position the microphone correctly. So you have to point it at the direct center point between where your speakers are. Regardless of where in the room it tells you to put it, the mic always has to be facing that point. So for me, where my desk is, I actually have 2 screens, and in the middle I have this pole which my usual front camera is mounted on. So for me, that's my central point. I would always focus my Sonarworks mic on this point here. Even though my speakers are to the left and right, this is the dead center spot. So that is where I would sort of focus all the pointing the microphone towards. So now we just need to go through a few steps to basically get the mic set up. So the microphone needs to be at the same level as my ears. So that's more or less next to my ears. The guide does say you can hold the mic, but personally I'd recommend having it on a stand because that's much more consistent. Aim it between the speakers and hold it away from your body, but if it's on a stand, you don't need to worry about holding it away. So now we need to start measuring the gain. So to do this, I've got to point the mic directly at the center point from my listening position. So that's going to be about here. And what I now need to do is I need to hit start, and it's going to give me a countdown. And then I have to balance the output level with the mic. So I need more gain, so I'm going to turn that up. So now it's verifying the signals. So you can see it's doing something there in the background. It's basically working out now where the mic is in relation to the speakers. So this step takes a while because it's obviously getting to know the mic. So for the second step, I do actually need to hold the microphone because now I need to measure the speaker distance. So we need to come over to one side and fire this up, making sure I'm pointing it at the center of the left speaker.
Stay where you are. Measurements in progress. Left speaker done.
Now we do the same for the right side. So now that I've done that, this will now tell me how far apart my speakers are from left to right. We can double check this with the measuring tape and we can correct it within the software. Once you've checked and confirmed, enter the distance between the speakers. Then you need to locate your listening spot. So that's the point you sit when you're hearing the music. So for me, it's this spot. So now I need to put the mic back on the stand, and that's going to be in my listening position. So I'm about here, looking directly at the center point. So let's put that mic right there. And now we're going to do one more test. And that will now tell me how far away my head is from the speakers. I can once again verify that and correct it in the software. So now that's done, we need to now start measuring the room. So the first thing I'm going to do is move my chair out of the way, so I have freedom of the space in the room so I can move the mic around the room. So what will happen is when we hit this next button, it will tell us where we need to place the mic. So the first position is right in the center of the room. So we need to find where that point is. So I'm going to estimate that it's about here, and then we're going to hit start. Right, so those beeps and sweeps you're hearing there are the pulses that the software generates through your speakers. Then the microphone, this microphone right here, picks those up. That is what it uses to basically work out the frequency sweep of your entire room. So obviously it hears those in different positions of the room. It gives you 40 different points altogether to put the microphone. Once it's taken all those measurements, you end up with the EQ graph that I showed you at the start of the video, which is my own studio's EQ. Your own home recording space may give you a slightly different result. As I said, the issues I knew I had is in these back corners. And this back corner over here had some bass issues. And right in the center of the room underneath where the light is, I had some mid-dip issues. But in my listening position, which is a little bit more forward, more kind of in line with these panels, it sounds fine. So obviously Sonarworks is going to help me correct that problem. So now that my room is measured, I've gone through all the stages, I've recorded 40 different pulses on the mic. I can now open up SoundID Reference as a standalone program or as a plugin in my DAW, and I can enjoy the full benefit of what my room should sound like. So it's really simple to set up and calibrate. It can take a while the first time you do it because, like I said, it does take 20 minutes. But the second time you do it for a different set of speakers, the process is much easier because you know what to expect. So that's all there is to it. It's really simple and it makes the biggest difference to your home recording space. So there you go. There is a quick guide on how to set up and use Sonarworks SoundID Reference. For me personally, like I said, I've been using this for a long time. I really think this is a great piece of software. I've been using this since it was Sonarworks Reference 4. SoundID Reference now is just the next level. They've taken this thing even further, and it's such a great thing. For me, it's really helped my mixes translate to any system outside of this room. I have gotten the room pretty decent with the acoustic treatment, but I still have a few little issues, and SoundID Reference really just helps to tame and correct those things. For me, it's really useful because that means the videos I make sound good on the devices you guys watch them on. So it's one thing for the videos to sound great for me when I'm making the videos and creating the audio here in my studio, but the important thing is that you guys hear the results on your end. So when you guys play back the audio that I record here, it should sound good. And Sonarworks SoundID Reference really does help me do that. I've been using it for a long time now. I'm a big fan, like I said, and it's such a great thing. You can actually try this out yourself. So if you scroll down to the description, there's a link to their website. You can actually get a fully functioning 21-day trial. So go try it out. Download it. You don't have to put in any card details. Try it out yourself in your own home studio. Even if you don't have the official mic, just use any mic. Use a condenser mic if possible, but if you do have access to a measurement mic, even better. These are fairly affordable. You can buy them on their website. They're pretty cheap to buy. You can also buy them on websites like Amazon as well. This will help you obviously measure the room in the right way. But like I said, any mic will do for trialing it out. You can use the headphone profiles as well if you mix on headphones. There's a bunch of different things you can test out. But I would recommend trying it. And if you like it, then obviously you know it's worth the investment and it will take your audio to the next level. Let me know down below in the comments if you guys have tried it. And if you do try it, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear how this has affected your own listening experience in your own home studios. Because none of our home studios are ever built for purpose. There's always a compromise. Thank you guys for watching. As always, like I said, let me know down below what you think. And I will see you guys very, very soon. Thanks so much for watching.